Welcome to Short Course, episode 136 for September 20th, 2024. I'm your host, Ben Barry. This week, I want to cover some aspects, some more sort of decisions, choices made leading up to both the Area 6 and the North Carolina section match that were shared by the two and sort of review how they went. But I wanted to start with just a little bit of current events, and that is to say this past weekend was Handgun Nationals in Talladega, which is sort of a confusing name for anybody not very much in the know. So we have Carry Optics Nationals, which is handguns, and then we have Open PCC Nationals, which one of those is a handgun. But then all the other handgun divisions, so the other 6 handgun divisions, are at Handgun Nationals. So it was a pretty big match, as big as they could make it for a 3-day, 16-stage match at Talladega, which, I mean, just kind of comes with the territory. With the number of bays they have at Talladega, either you double up bays, which causes backlogs, or you just go with big field courses on every bay. And it sounds like this year they just went with big field courses. So fewer stages, but still a lot of shooting. The thing that I think is particularly interesting and noteworthy to you as the listener to this podcast is something that was done for the first time at this match and hopefully will be done going forward is some actual media coverage in a new way. And so it's being called, I think it's USPSA Today. I guess a joke on USA Today. I'm not sure. But basically, John Scouten from Shooting USA and I think 2 other guys were out there for the whole weekend working as a crew and taking a combination of steady cam shots following the shooter through the shooting area, as well as I think 1 or 2 tripod angles and editing them together and putting out a number of videos that are so far about 20 minutes long. A lot of them basically follow an entire squad shooting, basically every person on that squad shooting a single stage. So it's a very cool look at a number of stages at USPSA Nationals in a depth that you don't normally get to see. If you just, for example, if you're just watching one person's match video, you only see sort of one view or one approach to each stage. And I find getting to see, sometimes 2 or 3 different shooters. Like when I want to get the sense of the stages at a match, I'll go and try and watch 2 or 3 different people all shoot the same match. But when you have 16 stages, sometimes it's hard to keep them all straight. They edit them in the video together in different orders. Anyway, there are 11 of these episodes now. One of them is like a vendor showcase. One of them covers the awards ceremony, but the rest of them, I think I've only watched the first 3 or 4 because honestly, there's, like I said, each one's 20 minutes. So I think there's over 3 hours of content, but it's all posted on YouTube. It's all free. And it's definitely way more coverage of the Nationals than we've really seen ever before. Definitely better, I think, even than the old live streams that they used to have, where they would try and they would have static cameras on multiple stages and they try and cut between them. But if there was nobody shooting on any of the 3 stages where they had static camera set up, then you were just watching dead time. And so on YouTube, you just kind of hit the arrow button just to skip through the dead time. Where this, they've cut all of that out. Now, it's not perfect. It'd be cool to see the scores for each run. In particular, on the very first episode, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the Production Super Squad. It was their first stage of the day. And there was this one over the top swinger that everybody was kind of like, I'm not sure how the hits were. It'd be cool if we knew, even if not all the hits for the whole stage, just know, okay, he got 2 alpha or alpha delta. And a couple of them, they cut in a little bit of banter after the stage with the shooter, kind of talking about that. So I think there's certainly room to go up from here, but this is also, without question, some of the best media coverage and certainly quick turnaround coverage of Nationals that we've seen. I'll have the link in the show notes to the YouTube playlist with all the videos that have been published so far, and presumably if any more are published by the time you hear this, they'll be added there. So check it out. Let us know what you think. Send the board an email if you like it, what you think would be better, if you think it was a valuable addition to Nationals for everybody that couldn't be there in person to still get to sort of vicariously enjoy it. So yeah, give it a look and let us know what you think. So I have a list of topics here that my Spidey sense tells me I'll probably take 2 episodes to cover, of basically all of the, like I said, things that decisions that we made to put into practice at both Area 6 and North Carolina section and how they worked out. And I know I've talked about it before, but I have to mention it every time. And the top of the list is definitely staff reset. And it's a funny thing. I've actually tried to ask some questions of the longtime locals, and there are some guys that remember North Carolina running the section match as a staff reset match at least into the early 2000s, like 2003, 2004. When I shot, well, I worked my first one. I didn't even sign up to shoot it. I shot it on staff day, but it never occurred to me just to sign up as a competitor. I worked my first one in 2013. It was staff reset then, and that was my first level too. I thought that's the way all major matches were. I was pretty baffled when I went to nationals the next year, and it wasn't that way, but water under the bridge on that one. And so it's something that's certainly culturally around here been something for a while. Now, this was I believe the third or fourth year that Area 6 has been run as a staff reset match. And obviously the previous 2 or 3 years, whichever it was, were under the previous area director, Bruce Wells. And it's run well there as well. And it's one of these things where when I have these conversations where people say, oh, that's something that only works in Area 6, or it only works because they have local staff. Well, no, most of the people who worked both matches, Area 6 and North Carolina, were not local to the range. They came in and stayed in a hotel and were given a staff package that covered that cost, as well as given, in the case of Area 6, staff jerseys, in the case of North Carolina, staff t-shirts, just, operating on different budgets. But in both cases, we did everything we could to take care of them. So basically, you shouldn't be out of pocket for your hotel and your gas and your food to spend the weekend at the match. Yes, you get your match fee for free, but then on top of that, basically, you shouldn't be out of pocket. If you split a hotel room or split an Airbnb, obviously it's not enough to cover a single occupancy hotel room, but that would just be unrealistic for the number of nights for this kind of match. But if you have another staff member to split the cost with, you should be able to basically break even. So that's one aspect of the staff package. But a lot of it is also some of the intangibles. So things like making sure the staff is taken care of, that they're well fed. So Steph in particular puts a lot of thought and work into making sure the staff have a good lunch. And at both matches, we ended up having at various points, on some of the days of the match, we had a food truck there, but the food truck was purely for the competitors. The staff were all taken care of with boxed lunches that were prepared offsite and delivered so that she could just drive up to a stage, hand everybody a boxed lunch. Everybody could take a break all at once. They didn't have to take a break, have somebody take orders for the whole squad, walk over to the food truck, wait 20 minutes for the food truck to make the food. None of that. And it wasn't, another comment that we get fairly often is people are just thankful that it's a staff lunch that isn't just barbecue again, because it makes sense economically. You just get a whole bunch of barbecue and you can feed a whole bunch of people pretty inexpensively. It's all ready all at once. I get it logistically, but it's definitely something where the boxed lunch approach, whether it's McAllister's Deli or there's this one place in Raleigh that we've used a couple times. Well, the two times that the match has been at Sir Walter, that just make really, really hearty sandwiches with a side and a cookie and a bag of chips. And so it's an actual hearty meal. It's not like a, peanut butter sandwich in a brown paper sack. It's actually, people feel taken care of. And, things like a nice staff dinner, a thoughtful, hopefully useful staff gift. So over the years with the NC section, it's been everything from a monogrammed gun rug that'll, hold everything up to an open gun. Obviously, something to hold a PCC wouldn't work for everyone, but it has the match logo and the year on it, and it's each year Steph would try and color coordinate things. So the staff t-shirts would be blue and the gun rugs were blue that year, or the year that it was a 20-ounce insulated mug with the logo on it, the mug was red and the t-shirts were red. And this all comes from something that actually goes back, probably, well, at this point, 30 years, but it would have been about 20 years by the time I was getting into shooting, which is there used to be a match here in Oxford, North Carolina called the Carolina Cup, which was basically the unofficial third nationals of IDPA. And it was basically the biggest national level match in IDPA. So IDPA, they typically have an indoor nationals at an indoor range. It used to be up at the Smith & Wesson range. I haven't kept up with it in the last few years. I don't know if they still do that, but it used to be they'd have indoor nationals in like February or March when it was still cold outside. And then they would do an actual nationals somewhere each year. And I know the last few years it's actually been at Talladega, but there would be a sort of third national level match. I think typically in June. I'd have to go back and look at records and everything. But anyway, it was run in Oxford, North Carolina by a man by the name of Frank Glover, who he loved it. It was his whole world. He just loved putting this match on, and he would do monthly matches and IDPA and various other things. And he would tell me stories about when he used to run IPSC, when IPSC was IPSC, and, before all this gamer crap, because he used to run IPSC matches, and then he jumped over to IDPA when IDPA split off as a more practical shooting sport. But he would do the same thing. And there was an element where every year there would be sort of a theme, and everything would be color coded, the staff shirts, the competitor shirts. And I still have a stack of Carolina Cup shirts, and the 2012 one was black and the 2013 one was a dark blue. And there's something about that color coding that sticks in people's minds, and it makes the event more memorable. And so just trying to find little touches like that. And something else that we got a lot of comments on at Area 6 and at the North Carolina section, which has always been a theme and always been a strong point of Stephanie, is just the communication. So something she kind of figured out on the fly the first year she was running the North Carolina section was we'd be there for staff day, and staff day would be wrapping up, and everybody was asking her questions. Do we need to bring this? What stage do we go to? When do we need to be here? Or when is this? When is that? And what she ended up doing that year and every year since is queuing up emails that go out around 3 or 4 p.m. each day to the staff. And they just tell them, hey, here's all the information you're going to need for the next day, whether it's the schedule, whatever the information you need to bring, if it's the last day, information about teardown, all that stuff. And obviously now she does one the night before the staff match with all the details about the staff match. And, even leading up to the match, just the amount of communication, it's work. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is something that once you get into a rhythm of it, once you automate it, once you have sort of the templates and the checklists and everything, keeping up with that level of communication is actually fairly straightforward. And so that's something else that I think is a big element in terms of people being willing and even borderline excited to come back and work staff reset at a match like this and drive hours and hours. I mean, for North Carolina, we had people coming from all over. We had staff from outside of North Carolina. We had some staff from South Carolina, from Virginia. So people coming from all over just to work that match. For Area 6, we had people coming from all over Area 6. And actually, in the case of both matches, we had more than enough people so that actually when we had the usual crop of last minute dropouts and just, hey, I can't make it and all that, we still had plenty, which was a great feeling. So it wasn't like we were kind of trying to scrape people together at the last minute. And I think the momentum and the reputation of this match for taking care of the staff is certainly something. The fact that we had that turnout is a testament to that. But again, for everybody that says, it can't be done, it's only because they only have locals, they have a lot of locals. It's like, no, that's not it. There might be other things that are special about North Carolina or about Area 6, but that isn't it. Now, something else that was very different about this year, something that we did differently both with Area 6 and North Carolina, was taking a different approach to sponsorship. And so this year, both matches went to a cash-only sponsorship model. So most matches, they work on a model where if you want to sponsor, there's a certain dollar value you have to send, but the dollar value can be in merchandise, it can be in gift cards, or it can be in cash. But it's almost never in cash because every company can either issue gift cards or send some product. And as I've discussed before, how you actually manage all of that product and or gift cards it's a bit of a sticky situation. Ideally, you'd be in a situation like Nationals where you put everything on a prize table and at the end of the match, everybody walks the prize table in order of finish. Now, even there are some complexities around, let's take Handgun Nationals just recently. Well, limited optics was by far the biggest division. So how do you do that split between the limited optics prize table, production single stack, revolver, limited 10, limited, right? You got 6 divisions. How, what's the bias and the weight that you give to each prize? I mean, again, this is nothing new. These are that particular problem, sort of how to balance divisions on a prize table. That's nothing new, but lacking that at a match where not everybody shoots the same schedule, which North Carolina and Area 6 both were, really the only other option is to do some kind of random draw prize. So you check in, you've got a number assigned to you, and maybe the number is a holster for a gun you don't shoot, or a gift certificate to a company that sells something you don't need, or any number of things. If you're lucky, you'll get something you can use. In a lot of cases, you either, swap it to somebody for cash, or you just find your buddy who reloads. If you don't reload and you got a gift certificate for some bullets from a bullet manufacturer, you just say, hey, you want this? And he'll say, yeah, sure. I've never shot those, but I'll order a couple boxes and try them. And, maybe that turns into a long-term sale for that company, but maybe it doesn't. Now, for the company, it's actually good for them if the gift certificates get given out and then never redeemed and just sit on somebody's shelf and never get used, because they basically get to sponsor the match and it doesn't really cost them anything. So this, in my opinion, this model, this product first, gift certificate first model, it really is to the benefit of the sponsors and to the detriment of the match. Because if we're being honest, unless you actually have everybody walks the prize table at the end style prize table, just doing a random draw prize table doesn't actually meaningfully contribute to the actual competitive aspect of the match in any way. It's basically just like a little side raffle that you enter just by being present. And I will say one thing that we did in years past with North Carolina was we did a little differently, where we would divvy up all the prizes into 4 different pools for the 4 different schedules as equally as possible, and then lay out all the prizes. And when you checked in, you got a chance to walk the prize table then. So you at least had some of that element where people could pick a prize that was useful to them. So you wouldn't, even if there was a $50 thing for a gun you don't use, or a $20 thing over here for a gun you do have, well, you'd take the $20 thing because it's actually more valuable to you and that it's something you can actually use. So there was a little bit of that, but to be honest, even just that required receiving all the product, cataloging it, inventorying it, splitting it up into 4 equal groups, having somebody sitting at registration, setting everything out, making sure people understood that, no, you take one thing. Like some people just think it's like, oh, help yourself to whatever's on the table. It's like, no, it's not how it works. So it basically adds the role. I mean, in a lot of cases, big matches will have a sponsorship coordinator person, and their role is to solicit the donations of prizes and then, organize them and get them set out on the table. And that just, we didn't have anybody to act as that in that role. And we thought it would be an interesting experiment to run with both matches and just say straight up to sponsors, if you want to sponsor a stage, great, here are the rates. And you just write us a check. We'll send us your banners. We'll put them up. You'll be in the match book. You'll be on the, if you're a match level sponsor, you'll be on the t-shirt. But at the end of the day, we're not dealing with prizes. We're not, even just the fact that we generally, when we were running the North Carolina match at Rowan, we live 2 hours from the range. Either we have to have all the prizes shipped to the range, or to someone who lives near the range, and then they bring them to the range for the match. And then we have to do the inventory on site there during the match, or we have them shipped here and we can do the inventory here, but then we have to drive with 3 or 4 large boxes full of prizes, which takes up space. Even in a minivan, when you got kids and range bags and chrono equipment and everything else, space is finite. And so just these little nuts and bolts things about just having to, who receives the prizes, who does the inventory, when do you do the inventory? Just all this stuff just basically went away by just making this decision to go to a pure cash sponsorship model. And it was, on the one hand, I wouldn't change that decision. I don't think that it was a mistake. I don't think that it was a bad idea. I definitely think it took some understanding. It took some education of various folks, because even though this is very common internationally, basically every IPSC match is cash only sponsorship. There is no prize table. You pay your match fee like you're going to the movie theater, and you just, you get your experience and then you go home. There's no door prize or anything like that. But here in the US, that's not the culture. And so people were used to when they sponsor a match, having a sort of standard deal. And there were a number of sponsors that just weren't interested. And honestly, that didn't really bother me in any way. I understand that they would rather be a part of the older system, and there are plenty of matches out there they can sponsor on the other system. But at the end of the day, even if they had sent us a stack of gift cards or a stack of product, that, if anything, would have just made more problems for us. We would have had to, just coordinate that. And it would have taken time away from making the match the best competitive experience that it could have been. Now, I will say neither match sold out. So like we didn't have a stage sponsor for every single sponsor, but okay, that's fine. The few sponsors that were there, I think, stuck out more or got more coverage. So for example, at Area 6, Excalibur was our title sponsor, and they sent us a whole bucket of banners. And so we ended up putting some of their banners up on stages that otherwise were unsponsored. So they got the most exposure. There were a few match sponsors, and then there were a few stage sponsors, and they all got their exposure. We had Taurus sponsored the side match, which was sort of it was about a lower level than even a stage sponsorship. And so we kind of tried to let the sponsors pick the level they wanted to participate at. And so, obviously the match sponsorship was the most, but you get your logo on the t-shirt. Stage sponsorship, you sponsor on that stage. We only had the one kind of general sponsorship where Taurus did the side match, but we had some other ideas around the safe areas, or we had the shuttles, and just if somebody wanted their logo just floating around, then that would be another place, and obviously in the match book and whatnot. But I have no regrets about it. I think it was an interesting model. I think it definitely accomplished the goal that we were looking for in terms of giving the match resources, in terms of being able to have actual cash money to, buy targets, buy stuff for staff, cover the amount of staff that we had. All of these things that cash actually solved that problem. And, if we just had, again, a bunch more stack of products or gift cards, it'd be, great for the shooters that got that stuff, but it wouldn't actually make the match a competitively better experience. And I do think, unfortunately, one thing that also got kind of caught up in this was, so one of the things that we did is we set the pricing to just be on site in the vendor area at $100, which literally just covered getting a lunch for the 3 days of the main match. And so the idea was, anybody who wanted to be there, we wanted as many people who were willing to physically be present there at the match to come and be on site at the vendor area, even if they didn't want to sponsor a stage. And so, for example, Brian Conley from Hunters HD Gold, he said to my face, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me quoting him. He's like, "You guys aren't charging enough for this," because all he did was pay the $100 to come be a vendor on site, and we were thrilled to have him. And his policy is he only sponsors with his gift certificates for Hunters HD Gold, but obviously he was happy to pay the $100 and be on site, and I'm sure he got to have a lot of folks come through. And I remember at one point he was telling me on Sunday, he was saying he had like 12 loaner pairs of Hunters HD Gold out on the range on people who were still shooting. So obviously he was having a lot of interactions with folks. People were trying his product. So I think for him, obviously traveling to a match like this is a huge investment of time. And just to be there was the main value, and being able to be there and talk to people and sort of educate them on his product and sort of have that personal connection was a big thing for him. And that was really the main puzzling thing. And I don't know what we would do differently there, but there were a number of sponsors that I got the sense they not only kind of chafed at the cash sponsorship and didn't want to play that game, but they weren't even willing to pay the $100 to be on site. And again, I mean, I wish we'd had more vendors. I mean, I think the vendors that were there got a lot of attention from the people that were there because there were only 5 or 6 of them. And so there's a benefit in that, right? Being one of the few people willing to get on the bandwagon early, you stand out more in a smaller crowd. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really know what we would have done differently there, because really we wanted the option to be a vendor to be as much of a slam dunk as possible. Now, I get it. We were the weekend right after Area 5. We were, a few weeks before Nationals. And so unless you're a real hardcore road warrior like Brian Conley there, it could definitely be tough to make it out to be a vendor at another match. But that was the way we did it, and I think it was a certainly a successful experiment, and hopefully something. I'd be curious to hear other folks trying this model and to sit down and sort of think about how we want to run it next year. But until we get to a point, I know I mentioned, I think it was last week, having some, hypothetical Area 6 match where it's everybody shoots, AM, PM, like Friday, Saturday, and then there's actually an awards dinner and a prize table, basically like a nationals that's just 2 days instead of 3. Until we get to a point like that, I don't see a prize table making sense. And then the last bullet point before I'll call it for tonight is that just we also had hoped, depending on how the match finances worked out, we had hoped to potentially be able to do some cash payouts, and we didn't end up doing that for a few reasons. One is that, well, just to be honest, that would have been contingent on getting probably substantially more sponsorship dollars coming in, but also operating at the larger scale of going from, a section match to an area match, there were some increased costs. Now, the match did come out ahead. We have to do the final finances, but I think the overall surplus that was generated from the match, revenue above costs, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple grand. So enough to cover some RO classes, certainly an RO and a CRO class for next year, which, is a sort of a package deal. You get a discount when you host a level 3 match. They do each class at half off. So it saves you $800, give or take. But even with that, hosting an RO class, you're looking at probably needing to fund something like $1,000 out of pocket. CRO class, similar. So having some funds to basically pay it forward and bankroll that. And actually this year's RO and CRO class also came out of that money because we had some match fees from, when at the time those classes happened. So this year's match will basically end up paying for 2 years of classes, which is good. But obviously in future years, it'll be kind of this year's match pays for next year's classes. But yeah, this is something, cash payouts. I mean, this is probably a whole other discussion and a deep rabbit hole to go down. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't shake the feeling that the nice thing about a really high quality staff reset match is that every competitor benefits from it. And the downside to a cash payout is only the top guys benefit from it. And, when I think about if you could have a prize pool of X $1,000, right? Or that same prize pool could basically afford to get you one more staff member on every stage out of 12 stages. I think it would actually be better for the match, better for the median competitor, right? Better for everybody in the match to have the extra hand on each stage helping to reset, where at the end of the day, if there is a cash payout, it kind of happens out of sight, out of mind of everyone. It happens afterwards. It helps defray the costs of the guys that won, but I mean, certainly we're a long way from being anywhere close to having the kind of sponsorship that can put enough money on the table to make it so that you could even cover your whole costs for, training up and, traveling to the match and staying in a hotel and all your food and everything. Even covering all those expenses, you'd have to have a pretty hefty prize pool, and we're nowhere near that. So it was one of those things that, originally, I'd said in the plan, I'd like to do cash payouts if we can, but as time went on and the budget just kept evolving, and we were looking at how many staff to have and basically what the prize distribution would look like, it never really made sense to really lean heavily into that, instead of just trying to make sure we had, plenty of props and plenty of staff and just make the actual on the range, on the ground experience of the match as good as it could be, and putting our money towards that. So I would still love to be in a situation where, and maybe this is what, would get sponsors involved or interested, is, you have some big name gun sponsor, like, Glock was a match level sponsor for us here, but, if they were willing to fund the prize pool for production or carry optics or, a division likely to be won by a Glock, and some 2011 manufacturer wanted to fund the prize pool for, as they're, instead of sponsoring a stage, you sponsor that prize pool. Until we get to something like that, and then obviously that manufacturer would have to get enough ROI on that writing that check, because that's going to be a check, not product or gift certificates. Until we get to a situation like that, I don't see it making sense. So we didn't end up doing cash payouts or cash prizes. And again, I think that I wouldn't change that based on how we sort of seen how everything shook out, where we're going to end up coming with a modest surplus that'll fund next year's RO classes. I think it was the right call. So I will leave the rest of this for next week, and that wraps up this episode of Short Course. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is ben@berryshooting.com. Talk to you next time.